We are a library system of 9 libraries, and all of our coding events were going to be organized at one central location. So all 3 people working on the project were in one location, but we were going to be sending it out to nine locations total. So what we, it says my internet connection's unstable, so I'm sorry if it's jerky. But so we send kits normally out in these kits like this, and it has our event plan that talks about what is going to happen at each event. But we realized that these, the coding exercises that we were going to be using were different than anything we'd ever done before. So it was more complicated gadgets. It was some terms that our staff weren't familiar with, and educational teaching techniques that were different than anything that we've ever done. So we decided to approach this in a very different way. I'm going to be switching here to my screen. So right away, we decided that we needed to cover all these different topics before the events actually rolled out at any of our branches. So the training topics that we decided to cover were luring in parents, because we were finding at our central location that a lot of parents didn't understand what coding or computational thinking was. Then we wanted to make sure that staff had buy-in, that they understood what we were talking about and why it was important to libraries. The difference between coding and computational thinking, best practices, teaching methods, and hands-on experience. Okay. Then, so first of all, we covered why coding. So this was for all staff, so that all the front lines could talk to parents and kids as they were coming in, but this was specifically, appealing to parents. So we talked about, what kind of openings there were with computing jobs, what it looked specifically like in our state, how schools are not teaching computer science in every school, and how specifically the STEM problem, we hear all this information about we've got to get kids STEM ready, and 58% of all new jobs in STEM are in computing, but only 8% of STEM graduates are in computer science. So there's a big gap here. And then also to really lure in those parents to talk about how computer science majors have higher lifetime earnings. So then we also wanted to stress that it doesn't matter if they're going into computer science, that these computational thinking skills are going to help out everybody. So it's going to help with a variety of skills when you're talking about tinkering and you're talking about prototyping and collaborating. There are all these different skills that are developed through learning computational thinking. So then we wanted to get staff buy-in and make sure they understood why we're not trying to take over what schools are doing, because schools aren't doing it, but also why is it important to do it at our library. So we talked about how we're experts in lifelong learning and supporting personal passions, that we've already got the infrastructure with our high-speed internet and our experience with teaching STEM skills already. Talking about how libraries are society's great equalizers, and this is something that a wide variety of professions need in. And then again, just like Paula talked about, it's very similar to early literacy skills. And then also the goal of coding is about expressions, and libraries are all about freedom of thought and access to information. And that's what we will be providing through this. And then we also wanted to kind of calm anybody's fears down about whether they could actually handle learning something new at this point. And we aligned it with reference skills. So just like you solve patrons' problems at the desk about, you know, any kind of question that they have, you can still use those skills while figuring out any coding issues. And so this was another thing that kind of helped them picture themselves as somebody who could handle coding and fixing all those little issues that come in while you're coding. Then we talked about the difference between coding and computational thinking. And I'm not going to go over this in detail since it was covered by others. So we kind of covered that about the difference between concepts and approaches, and then we talked about the best practices for libraries, which is the ready to code concepts, which I'm sure you've already been you covered as well. It kind of show you that we talked about each particular aspect, and then some examples for how to do that in our libraries. And then again, here's the pathway for Ready to Code. And then we talked specifically about our teaching methods, which was very different from us. Now, we have libraries that serve a town of under 500 people. We have libraries where, you know, there's one person that's a regular staff. They might not even have a college degree, and they're the ones running that library. So we really needed to delve deeper into teaching methods that they would not be familiar with from their time in school. So the first concept that we taught was to try to show them what it's going to look like in these types of coding programs. So what we wanted to make sure that there were low floors and high ceilings. So when kids came in, they could come in with you know, no experience and still have fun and have things to do in that event. But kids who were really quick learners or had done that, worked with something like Spiros before, they could have all kinds of projects that they could do and do more advanced work right side by side to somebody who was new. Then we talked about the creative learning spiral that Mitchell Resnick termed as some, you know, students start with an initial idea, they build prototypes, they share with others, run experiments, and revise their ideas based on feedback and experience. And this is the really exciting idea. And I really strongly suggest that everyone reads Lifelong Kindergarten, because it was such an inspirational book by Mitchell Resnick for the work that we do here. But kids, you know, as soon as they start working on these projects, they just kind of, their imagination explodes, and they keep finding new ways to tweak things and fix their problems and work with others. And this was a really important concept with how we were going to frame our events. And also the idea that curves prefer to use screws, not nails, because there's going to be all these quick solutions, quick fixes that the kids aren't going to figure out the whole problem before they actually put their hands on our gadgets or the different events and activities that we have, that they were going to figure out small parts and work forward. And then Homago, we really want to stress the type of atmosphere that you should have at your library, where part of the learning is the kids hanging out and just socializing, and then they have the different activities where they can mess around, and that's going to help them really geek out and get more excited. And it's more about the environment that you're creating for the kids. Here's an example of what a library in Philadelphia did to incorporate that space. Would be establishing a teens only area, or have teen power hours, bring in near peer mentors who are creative, providing games and art supplies, allowing teens access to computers and equipment. So some of these things we just told the branches that they could set up themselves, but that our kits were going to help them fill that space. And then we talked about connected learning, and especially customizing the different entry pathways for our for anyone who is coming in and attending. Some of it was sharing and making sure that the kids were connecting to the other kids in the room, and that they had the ability to be seen as experts. So that there were different pieces there that we were going to be encouraging in that space. That wasn't really a normal way that we have had events in the past. So this isn't a step 1, step 2, step 3 type of event. It was very different. We're also going to be gathering information from the events, where we were going to be looking not just at what the children were learning, but also recording what they were creating, how they created it, and why. And so those were some questions that staff were going to be encouraged to ask. And then we also different roles that staff would be having within each event. So Catalyst, staff should be asking, how did you come up with that idea? Why did you think that happened? What did you want it to do? How can you add your own style to this project? For consultants, they would be offering tips and advice and helping refine, and also providing emotional support for those kids who get frustrated about things aren't working out, and they've tried to fix that code multiple times and it's just not working. So that consultant role was important too. And then the connector role, where you're bringing somebody, a kid that is really good at music, a kid that's really good at design, and a kid that's really good at storytelling, together to create like a really cool video game. And then as collaborator, being there working on your own project, and then have youth collaborate with you. And we brought in mentors, professionals who coded into the room in order to have students observe what master learners and professionals look like and how they problem solved and worked through projects. Then we also did training on our favorite tools. And so we actually had our staff lead our group meeting in preschool games. And so the staff had an opportunity to see what that looked like for all of our gadgets, like Cubettos and Ozobots, Spheros, Canos, Pies. The staff all got hands-on experience with how to use them. We had little activities for them. We had different challenges, and then the staff got to do that hands-on. And this was all staff, not just the ones that were going to be leading the programs, because we thought it was important that all staff had an opportunity to utilize it, so that when they are talking to patrons, they could come from an experienced background of, hey, this is what happens in this type of event. This is a really cool robot, that type of thing. And then, as I talked about before, we created these event plans that made sure that we really worked on incorporating those, the techniques that we talked about on in the event planning. So you can see the instructor role here has specific questions to remind yourself, like, oh, here are some ideas of what to ask when you are with the kids. And then again, always through the theme of it all was that the goal of teaching coding is not mastery of the programming language, but creating a meaningful and unique project.